Kidato Masik! Kidato Tonitzer Pupeg! Now Temwanetikim!
Every story has a foundation in objective reality, from the lessons learned to the experiences shared. This is no different for the story of Atlantis. Many people exaggerate its reality, even the original storytellers maybe. But here today, my goal is to ground this story back to its roots in reality. After this video, you will most certainly believe of a community of traders, and maybe even conquerors on an island where Atlantis is said to have been. This video is based on Dr. Benjamin B. Olshan's book, Lost Knowledge, the 16th volume in the Technology and Change in History series, which explores the idea of ancient civilizations with advanced technologies and the concept of a vanished golden age in many cultures. The story of Atlantis is told in Plato's Timaeus and Critias, where Socrates and three other men, Timaeus, Hermocrates, and Critias, discuss what makes a good society. Critias then uses the example of Atlantis. Critias learned of the story of Atlantis from his grandfather, also named Critias, who learned it from his father Dropides, who learned it from a document Athenian statesman and poet named Solon, who in turn learned it from an Egyptian priest of the temple of Neith in the city of Sais. The Egyptians seemed to be the only people at that time to know of Atlantis. Socrates asks for an example of an ideal state. Critias replies,
"Let me tell you this story then, Socrates. It's a very strange one, but even so, every word of it is true. The story is that our city had performed great and marvelous deeds in ancient times, which, owing to the passage of time and to the destruction of human life, have vanished. Of all these deeds, one in particular was magnificent. In Egypt, there is a district called the Sadik. The most important city of this district is Sais. This city was founded by a goddess whose name was Neith in Egyptian and Athena in Greek. He asked those priests of theirs who were scholars of antiquity about ancient times. He broached the subject of our own ancient history. And then one of the priests, a very old man, said, "Ah, Solon, Solon, you Greeks are ever children. There isn't an old man among you, young in soul, every one of you. Your souls are devoid of beliefs about antiquity handed down by ancient tradition. Your souls lack any learning made hoary by time. The reason for that is this. There have been, and there will continue to be, numerous disasters that have destroyed human life in many kinds of ways. The most serious of these involve fire and water, while the lesser ones have numerous other causes. And so also among your people the tale is told that Phaethon, child of the sun, once harnessed his father's chariot, burning everything on the earth's surface. This tale is told as a myth. Huge fires that destroy what is on the earth across vast stretches of time. When this happens, all those people who live in mountains or in places that are high and dry are much more likely to perish than the ones who live next to rivers or by the sea. Our Nile, always our savior, is released and at such times too saves us from this disaster. On the other hand, whenever the gods send floods of water upon the earth to purge it, the herdsmen and shepherds in the mountains preserve their lives, while those who live in cities in your region are swept by the rivers into the sea. This then explains the fact that the antiquities preserved here are said to be the most ancient. Now, of all the events reported to us, if there are any that are noble or great or distinguished in some other way, they've all been inscribed here in our temples and preserved from antiquity on. In your case, on the other hand, as in that of others, no sooner have you achieved literacy, comes the heavenly flood. It sweeps upon you like a plague and leaves only your illiterate and uncultured people behind. You become infants all over again. And so, Solon, the account you just gave of your people's lineage is just like a nursery tale. First of all, you people remember only one flood, though in fact there had been a great many before. Indeed, Solon, there was a time, before the greatest of these devastating floods, when the city that is Athens today not only excelled in war, but also distinguished itself by the excellence of its laws in every area.
To summarize what he said in my own words, history is not set in stone. We do not and will not know everything that has happened in the past. Fire and water have and will continue to destroy what we have created on this earth. The history we tell each other can be just as much as a fairy tale as the myths we know. For example, we believe and tell each other that the people of old were primitive, unable to think to the same capacity as us, though we find traces of humans conducting brain surgeries, creating concepts of flight, and traveling far distances in tree trunks. We criticize the giants whose shoulders we stand on. We continue to find artifacts and ruins that rewrite, or should I say reveal what we did not know, or lied about, with so much certainty. Nature can efficiently erase humanity, and those who survive may lack education to continue human history, resulting in a fresh start, hopefully of a better future. The Egyptian priest continues.
The records speak of a vast power that your city once brought to a halt in its insolent march against the whole of Europe and Asia at once, a power that sprang forth from beyond, from the Atlantic Ocean. For at that time, this ocean was passable, since it had an island in it in front of the strait that you people say you call the Pillars of Heracles. This island was larger than Libya and Asia combined, and it provided passage to the other islands for people who traveled in those days. From those islands, one could then travel to the entire continent on the other side, which surrounds that real sea beyond. Everything here inside the strait we're talking about seems nothing but a harbor with a narrow entrance, whereas that really is an ocean out there, and the land that embraces it all the way around truly deserves to be called a continent. Now on this isle of Atlantis, a great and marvelous royal power established itself and ruled not only the whole island, but many of the other islands and parts of the continent as well. What's more, their rule extended even inside the strait, over Libya as far as Egypt, and over Europe as far as Tyrrhenia. Now one day this power gathered all of itself together and set out to enslave all of the territory inside the strait. Your cities might shone bright with excellence and strength. She prevented the enslavement of those not yet enslaved and generously freed all the rest of us who lived within the boundaries of Heracles. Sometime later, excessively violent earthquakes and floods occurred, and after the onset of an unbearable day and a night, your entire warrior force sank below the earth all at once, and the Isle of Atlantis likewise sank below the sea and disappeared.
With this information, we can pinpoint where Atlantis is said to be. The Atlantic Ocean is the first big clue due to the island being used as a starting point for exploring other islands, or even a landmass on the other side of the ocean being on the opposite side, the Pillars of Heracles. The island is said to be as large as Libya and Europe combined. Its description supports the claims of civilizations knowing of the Western Hemisphere, such as the Cheonhado map. Pliny, in his natural history, said,
"There are seas encircling the globe on every side and dividing it in two, so robbing us of half the world, since there is no region affording us a passage from there to here or from here to there."
In the pseudo-Aristotelian book on the cosmos, it is said,
"The inhabited world is divided by the usual account into islands and continents, since it is not recognized that the whole of it is really one island, i.e. the Oikoumene, surrounded by the sea which is called Atlantic. Far away from this one, on the opposite side of the intervening seas, there are probably many other inhabited worlds, some greater than this, some smaller.
The Pillars of Hercules is the present-day Strait of Gibraltar, and the size of the island being comparable to that of Libya and Europe combined is noteworthy. Libya, Egypt, and Ethiopia were terms used to denote the African continent. This is illustrated by a Christian topography map from the 6th century AD, which was based on the book On the Cosmos, written in 350 BC, This map offers insight into how the Greeks and some of their neighbors perceived the world. In fact, compared to the map based on Herodotus's histories, written around 430 BC, the sizes of Libya and Europe are relatively small from their viewpoint, due to their knowledge of the world at that time, distorting their description of land masses compared to our knowledge. The island of Atlantis was said to have a plain that was the most beautiful and fertile of all, and in the middle of the island was a low, flat hill that was broken into a circle by Poseidon. He then created alternating rings of sea and land around the circle, making it inaccessible to humans. 2 subterranean streams were drawn up into springs, one warm and the other cold. The island was named after Poseidon's oldest son Atlas, and they eventually grew into an empire. The island was abundant in resources, including mines that produced both hard and fusible ore, as well as Orichalcos mountain copper, valued only less than gold. The island also had an abundance of trees, domesticated and wild animals, including a great population of elephants, aromatic plants, sweet-smelling roots and greens, herbs, trees, and gums from flowers and fruits. From these resources, the Atlanteans built their sanctuaries, palaces, harbors, and ship sheds, and improved the land. The Egyptian priest's account of Atlantis' history goes as far back as 9,000 years ago. However, the story is further mired in mythical tales and is not fully supported by concrete evidence. To better understand the history of Atlantis, researchers may need to look to at least pre-Bronze Age and older civilizations such as Egypt and Greece. Dr. Paul Schliemann's 1912 article, How I Found the Lost Continent of Atlantis, the Source of All Civilization, sheds light on the legendary lost city of Atlantis. The article contains the writings of his grandfather, Dr. Heinrich Schliemann, a renowned amateur archaeologist who discovered the ancient cities of Troy and Mycenae, being inspired by the tales of Homer. While these cities were once deemed as fanciful as Atlantis, they were eventually found. Dr. Heinrich left a sealed envelope before his death, with an inscription that read, "This can be opened only by a member of my family, who solemnly vows to devote his life to the researches outlined therein." In the article, Dr. Heinrich discovered the ruins of Troy at Hisarlik and uncovered the treasure of Priam, with a bronze vase inscribed in Phoenician hieroglyphics from the King Kronos of Atlantis. A papyrus roll found in the St. Petersburg Museum, written during the reign of Pharaoh Sent of the Second Dynasty, or 4,571 years BC, describes how the pharaoh sent out an expedition to the west in search of traces of the land of Atlantis. Another papyrus, written by Manetho, references a period of 13,900 years as the reign of the sages of Atlantis, placing this at the beginning of Egyptian history. These findings suggest that Atlantis may have been a real place, and its secrets could be uncovered through the study of ancient civilizations like Greece and Egypt. With all this in mind, the best location for Atlantis is off the coast of Europe and Africa, across the Strait of Gibraltar. Some people have even suggested the coast of Spain, as shown in the video, Finding Atlantis, full science documentary, by Top Box TV, which presents compelling evidence. However, further investigation is needed. The best documented estimates come from searching at least before the late Bronze Age collapse, 1200 to 1100 BC, during which civilizations fell and natural disasters erupted. Phoenicians, known as the world's greatest travelers, inhabited the region at the time, trading from Turkey to the Canary Islands and to Ireland. Evidence of Phoenician trade beyond those areas is likely, with examples like the Carthaginian explorer Hanno the Navigator's mid-6th century BC voyage along the African west coast, saying,
"In its inmost recess was an island similar to that formerly described, which contained in like manner a lake with another island, inhabited by a rude description of people. The females were much more numerous than the males and had rough skins. Our interpreters called them gorilla. We took 3 of the females, but they made such violent struggles, biting and tearing their captors, that we killed them and stripped off the skins, which we carried to Carthage."
These are the best documented estimates I can think of. There, of course, can be future possibilities of older evidence coming to light showing a different time period or people other than the Phoenicians. Only time will tell if these estimates hold true. The Phoenicians were Canaanites who controlled Palestine, Transjordan, and Syria in the Iron Age through the Late Bronze Age, but were forced out by the Arameans, the Neo-Hittites, the Israelites, the Sea Peoples, the Ammonites, and the Moabites and Edomites during the Bronze Age collapse, producing all-out war and disaster. They retained control of a reduced area with 5 main cities: Arwad, Byblos, Berytus, Sidon, and Tyre until about 1050 BC. Then they began establishing colonies in Cyprus, Sicily, Sardinia, Malta, southern Spain, and northern Africa. Their most famous colony, Carthage, became an empire built on trade, lasting nearly a millennium and stretching across the Mediterranean world, including Ireland and other Atlantic islands, ultimately losing it all to Rome, who called them Punics. If Phoenicia is chosen as the forebearers of Atlantis, the story the Egyptian priest told is referring to maybe a battle long lost to time. The Sicilian Wars, circa 550 to 304 BC, are the only known battles between Greeks and Phoenicians recorded, and most of the battles were against Syracuse and during Plato's lifetime. The 4 noteworthy landmasses in the area of where Atlantis is said to have been are the Açores Archipelago, the Canary Islands, the Savage Islands, and the Madeira Archipelago. 2 are noteworthy for this video, starting with the Açores Archipelago, located at the junction of the North American, Eurasian, and African tectonic plates, is divided into 3 groups of islands. The western group with the islands of Flores and Corvo, the central group with Terceira, Graciosa, São Jorge, Pico, and Fayal, and the eastern group with São Miguel and Santa Maria. Colonization began in 1439 after its discovery by Portuguese navigators in 1432. Artifacts discovered on the island may rewrite its history, but some deny it. I found an article from the Portuguese government's independent multidisciplinary commission, which investigated archaeological findings from Espigao and Monte Brasil's sites only on the central group of islands. They believed all the structures and forms observed there can be explained by natural, primary, or secondary processes, and that all constructions made by man on the island date no earlier than the 14th century. We will now read articles that hold more weight for the revision of history on the island, particularly with the accompanying photos. These articles explore beyond the central islands of the Azores. Upon seeing the photos analyzed in the next paper, which were from the same island investigated by the government, one might question whether the government has inadequate employees or is afraid of the consequences of an investigation. This paper actually attempts to argue that the markings on the island of Terceira have a natural cause, but ultimately disproves its own hypothesis, saying,
"The explanation for the carvings on regolith blocks is by gradual abrasion of large tree roots, which accrues the effects of frequent micro-earthquakes in the Azores." This hypothesis, previously suggested by R.G. Bednarik for similar grooves found in siliceous sandstones in Queensland, New South Wales, and on granite in Tasmania, seems to be the one that adjusts best to volcanic rocks of Terceira Island. Our field observations of hundreds of marks of various shapes and contexts eliminated the hypothesis of a possible geological origin. No mechanical or chemical erosion agent could produce such features. Moreover, these markings do not correspond to any sedimentary structures, nor can they be classified as geological groove marks, as no fluid transport could be responsible for the incision of the rock. Our first hypothesis was therefore to include these engravings in the category of prehistoric anthropogenic phenomena. However, several questions persisted. What instruments in such a primitive society could have been used to carve such hard rocks, trachytes and trachyandesites, so deeply, and what could be the purpose of such exhaustive work? Who would devote themselves to carving thousands of grooves so obsessively? What would be the purpose of such a dantesque task?
The failure to comprehend the actions and reasoning of prehistoric cultures led them to completely disregard the possibility of their existence. It is akin to denying the existence of various cultures due to us not knowing how structures were built, carved, or why they were made. Various shapes, including those resembling human figures, claws, and the Phoenician goddess Tanit were found. The abundance of seemingly purposeless rocks caused them to reject the idea of human involvement and attribute it to a natural phenomenon. However, this dismissal of human involvement, despite the clear presence of symbols, raises questions that cannot be ignored, highlighting the importance of seeing beyond the surface level. They continue.
Their origin cannot be attributed to weathering effects, mechanical or chemical, either. Neither wind nor heavy rain would produce such deep marks, and the organic acids exuded by plant roots are very weak acids and operate at a microscopic scale. Unable to find arguments for a natural origin, having put aside the hypotheses of there being fossils of plants or animals, ichnofossils, abnormal stratification, glacial striations, drag marks, or any form of erosion or erosion pattern, therefore coming to suggest an anthropogenic origin. In response to the questions and doubts expressed by these authors, Bednarik repeated his explanation. Tree roots can entrench themselves in the soil as if embracing the underlying rock. Markings found on granodiorites and muscovite biotite granites observed in Tasmania. This tightening of the roots on the rock originates a phenomenon of abrasion, studied in tribology, which studies the interacting surfaces in relative motion, including the concepts and application of the principles of dynamic friction, lubrication, and wear. When considering living organisms, as in the present case, it is designated as biotribology. The master's thesis, carried out to verify the geotechnical and chemical properties of the trachyte as an ornamental stone in a trachytic outcrop, 50 kilometers north of Lisbon, compared with samples of trachytes of Terceira Island. The more than 20 analyses of resistance to chemical agents allowed to classify the trachyte as resistant to the most aggressive reagents and with high concentrations. Despite its high degree of water absorption, trachyte is a rock resistant to mechanical actions and not very susceptible to environmental variations of high thermal, saline, leaching, and chemical amplitudes, classifying the trachyte as a rock resistant to intense mechanical actions, despite its high water absorption, a factor that may influence the behavior of the material outdoors. It proved to be not very susceptible to environments with high thermal amplitudes, salt, leaching, and acids. It would be of significant interest to extend the study of tribology to the area of rheology applied to plant biology, since studying viscosity, plasticity, elasticity, and changes in the shape and flow of material would allow a better understanding of the mechanisms behind rock material root interactions. However, the examples given by Bednarik and Shepherd and Jolly, even when mentioning previous works, differ fundamentally in one respect from the marks found in the Terceira Island. The marks referred to by those authors are almost always carved in sandstones, with no example being given in volcanic regions. Therefore, the Terceira Island grooves are the first of such kind. We wonder whether silica-rich rocks might be more vulnerable to abrasion by tree roots. However, it has not been discarded that such grooves may yet be found on other lithologies, such as basalts.
By 15th century Portuguese, either.
Estamos numa estrutura escavada na rocha, no tufo vulcânico. Tudo isto é feito pelo homem, não se trata de um fenómeno natural. Quando foi feito? Quem o fez? Até agora o que temos é a tipologia. Pela tipologia comparamos essas estruturas àquelas que existem no Mediterrâneo com pelo menos 2000 anos. Essa tipologia é a tipologia de estruturas fúnebres, designadas por columbários, que serviam para colocar a cinza dos mortos. Ao lado encontramos um forno onde houve cremação de ossos. As pastas brancas encontradas aqui no solo são exatamente as mesmas do outro lado. O que nós temos aqui no chão são pastas de óxido de cálcio com carbonato de cálcio com restinhos de conchas e restinhos de ossos.
For Dr. Rodriguez, these two structures are part of the same ritualistic complex, which is completed by a sort of ground basin in the middle of the columbarium.
They present their argument as being based solely on natural rock markings, but the paper acknowledges that some of the grooves may have been created by humans. They cite the work of A. Costa, who suggests that pre-existing grooves may have been used to create the symbolic patterns, and R.G. Bednarik, who demonstrated that ancient peoples sometimes added petroglyphs to natural rock markings, saying,
The possibility that prehistoric people observed natural rock markings, were intrigued by them, and sometimes added petroglyphs to them, such as cupules, is very real, as has been demonstrated at numerous sites.
Another article, Megalithic Constructions Discovered in the Açores, Portugal, instead suggests that the megalithic tombs, structures, and rock art created on the island of Terceira, possibly starting in the Neolithic and continuing into the Chalcolithic and Bronze Ages, is similar to megalithic structures in Western Europe. At the Grota do Medo site, similarities were found with the passage tombs found throughout Britain and Ireland and the rest of Europe, which were used as funerary monuments. One of the passage tombs they found seemed to be a collapsed mound, 3 meters in diameter and 4 meters into the passage. They were also built at the higher points of the hill Pico do Epigao, overlooking the land and sea, similar to other passage tombs in Europe. Structures similar to the Irish wedge-shaped gallery grave, bullens, which are depressions in stone to hold water, portal tombs, and cup marks, which are a form of prehistoric rock art found in the Atlantic and Mediterranean Europe, were also found. A few instances they use as evidence for human inhabitants may just be due to abrasion and present-day human uses, but further investigation is warranted. There is heavy evidence of Phoenicians trading with Ireland and Western and Northern Europeans, noting
The distance by sea between the south of Spain to the British Isles is almost the same distance between Portugal, mainland, and the Terceira Island, near 1,500 kilometers. Taking this in account, it is not a question of distance traveled by sea in the Bronze Age that made impossible to arrive to the Azores in these times, but a question of direction chosen.
Identificar 7 estruturas megalíticas, semelhantes às estruturas megalíticas da fachada atlântica europeia e insular, porque em todo o Reino Unido encontramos estruturas desta natureza, e que, pela tipologia, recuamos milhares de anos.
Dr. Rodriguez believes these are dolmens used by prehistoric cultures to place remains of the dead. These cylindrical cavities will be indicators for the human presence, showing intentional work in the rocks. Material accumulated inside the cavities has been dated to be 2,500 years old, at least. Ceramic pieces found in the area are believed to be even older, over 4,000 years.
Por outro lado, temos um trabalho com pedras gigantes que não sabemos como é que se fazia. Esta pedra foi levantada, a sua posição natural era na horizontal. Percebemos que assim era porque esta lava é extremamente viscosa e quando a lava se movimenta faz pequenas ondas, o que significa que nunca a lava pode escorrer nesta direção.
Whereas the Portuguese government hardly made any effort to investigate the site, the Portuguese-American Journal has made significant efforts to investigate the Açores, such as a perfect pyramidal structure found underwater in the region. Here is a clip.
Está a 40 metros da superfície entre a Terceira e São Miguel. Tem uma base maior do que um estádio de futebol. A pirâmide foi detectada nos aparelhos de navegação do velejador Diocleciano Silva.
É impressionante devido às formas. É uma pirâmide perfeita, não é?
Precisam das linhas, o velejador não acredita que a estrutura tenha origem natural e avança para uma explicação.
Atlantis existiu, porque e andam desde há mais de um século à procura dela no Mediterrâneo, não é? Expedições e mais expedições e nunca a encontraram. Neste momento, não sei se é neste momento, mas aí há uns 2 anos estavam, havia uma expedição no sul de Espanha, mas já no Oceano Atlântico, à procura de umas certas formações debaixo d'água e andam para lá, possivelmente seria Atlântida, mas nunca mais disseram nada. E o certo...
And the Portuguese Association of Archaeological Research, APIA, reported on inscriptions and rock art on the islands of Terceira and São Miguel. According to APIA's president, Nuno Ribeiro, while archaeological findings have been reported on most of the 9 Acarian islands, there are still more doubts than certainty among archaeological groups. Ribeiro has also revealed dozens of pre-Christian hypogeas, believed to be over 2,000 years old, which resemble ones found in Greek and Carthaginian cultures. Ribeiro is a PhD candidate in prehistory and ancient history at the University of Salamanca and the Autonomous University of Lisbon, with research in proto-history and rock art. He established the first center of interpretation of rock art in Portugal and has been the president of the APIA since its founding in 1998. In his paper, Land, Sea, and Skyscape, 2 case studies of man-made structures in the Azores Islands were examined to provide compelling evidence of human inhabitants since the Holocene period, around the 9th millennium BC. The paper examines the Maroiço structures on Pico Island and the artificial caves near the sea excavated in Monte Brazil on Terceira Island. The Maroicos are described as small stone constructions of volcanic origin, with the characteristic of being oriented towards the sun and arranged in stairs. In the Açores, they are said to have been created according to local tradition, being made from the clearing of volcanic stone to prepare for the planting of crops following the devastation of vineyards in the mid-19th century. Built using a wall system with large rocks piled on top with smaller rocks, most have staggered steps of approximately 1 meter in height, a lateral ramp, and some also have chambered structures inside. Similar systems have also been observed on other volcanic islands, such as Tenerife, Sicily, and the Mauritius Islands during the 19th and 20th centuries. There are 118 Maroicos sites concentrated in an area of 6 square kilometers. The Maroicos were found to have striking uniformity, aligning with wind directions that predominantly come from the southwest and northeast from May to July, and the southwest or northwest in winter. Statistical analysis was performed, with the null hypothesis stating that the Maroicos' orientations would correlate with wind directions even if they were randomly placed in a circular uniform population. However, the Chi-2 test p-value was found to be 5e to the negative 34, indicating that the Maroicos were purposely built to align with wind and other elements in the sky, and could not have appeared in those positions randomly. It is believed that the Maroicos may have been built for wind protection of crops and alignment with mountaintops, with a possible symbolic motivation associated with the summer solstice. Radiocarbon dating shows that some of these structures were developed during the 16th and 17th centuries, indicating that some are older than expected. Further investigation may uncover older layers, dating even further back in time. The Açores, especially Terceira, served as a strategic harbor for Portuguese fleets from 1521 and onwards. Near São Brás Fortress, built in the mid-16th century, 5 rock-cut-out caves on Monte Brazil are thought to have had military or civil uses. But this paper challenges that assumption. Each cave has unique features. The right cave has a water basin in the back. The left cave has a channel for external flow and 4 basins. And the middle cave has steps down to a holding cell for water and a niche in the back wall. Some of the caves have interesting light effects during equinox sunsets. In the right cave, light is projected onto the center of the back wall for about 2 days around the equinoxes. The middle cave's light projection hits the left side of the back wall and moves clockwise from winter to summer solstice and then anti-clockwise back to winter solstice.
In the Terceira Island, inside some perfectly carved volcanic rocks.
Todo este espaço parece ser espaço sagrado, que se percebe pelo eco que aqui se encontra e se consegue produzir quando se fala. E há canais que circundam a estrutura.
Stalactites in the middle cave were measured and compared to those from a nearby 17th century water storage system, assuming linear growth, the same nutrients and ambient conditions. Attempts to date the caves were unsuccessful due to contamination from nuclear tests in the 1950s, likely during Operation Argus, a series of U.S. nuclear weapons tests conducted in the southern Atlantic Ocean from August to September 1958. Task Force 88 sailed around the area of the Azores to record data at the conjugate point, as the rest of Task Force 88 headed to the South Atlantic to conduct the tests. In conclusion, the purpose and age of these caves remain a mystery, despite suggestions of potential connections to sun worship.
E que ligam 4 pias que são iluminadas pelo Sol em períodos do ano distintos, nomeadamente nos solstícios de verão e de inverno e no equinócio da primavera e do outono. A água passa neste circuito todo até se precipitar sobre o mar.
Next to it, there is a flooded cave.
Tem uma ligação entre si pela água e pelo simbolismo que a água representa numa hipotética purificação. No teto tem estalactites que se foram formando ao longo do tempo, que são biominerais, que uma datação relativa permite dizer que essa estrutura tem pelo menos 2000 anos.
But not everyone is convinced this complex is that old. Some say these could be stables from a 16th century fortress.
As pias serviriam para os animais beberem água, só que há aqui um problema, é que nenhum animal de 4 patas consegue beber água abaixo das patas.
Nuno Ribeiro's paper, Phoenicians in Açores, Portugal, Myth or Reality, explores the Açorian past through the colonial Portuguese, which supports the call for a revised history. Legend tells of the Portuguese landing on Corvo Island and finding a stone equestrian statue pointing west, a story first recounted by Portuguese chronicler Damido de Guas, saying,
"A stone statue standing on a slab, representing a man on top of a bone horse, and the man dressed in a rain cape, without hat, with one hand on the horse's mane, and the right arm stretched out, with all the fingers clutched except the second finger, pointed towards the west." This image was then sketched on the orders of King Manuel by Duarte d'Armas. After seeing the drawing, the king sent a skillful man, equipped with tools to remove the antiquity. When he returned with it, the man told the king he had found the statue destroyed by a tempest that had occurred during winter. But the truth is that it was broken due to poor workmanship, and they brought pieces of it. Everything remained a few days in the king's wardrobe, but what was done of these things, I could not discover.
The statue is also noted in the chronicles of Prince D. Joao, expressing that
I heard from the locals that in the rock below where the statue used to be were engraved some letters in the same stone of the rock, and because the place where this inscription was dangerous to reach, imprinted the letters that were not yet erased by time in some wax. The letters molded in the wax were already worn out, nearly shapeless. No one present at the scene managed to make sense of what the letters meant, nor what letters they were.
Father Gaspar Frutuoso, born on the Azores on the island of São Miguel in 1522, noted,
"The figure of a large man of stone standing on a slab or support, and in the stone were sculpted some letters, and some people say that his hand was pointing north-northeast or northeast, as if pointing to the great coast of the Terra dos Bacalhaus, Terra Nova, Newfoundland. Some say he was pointing southwest, as if indicating the Indias de Castella Antilles and the great coast of America, with 2 extended fingers, and in the other 3 that he had folded were some letters. No one knew how to read, and the locals. In their opinion, the builders were Carthaginians, as they traveled these parts. They would have left this stone monument with the letters as marks and signs of what they had discovered."
Punic and Hellenic coins dating back to 320 to 300 BC were discovered after a severe storm on Corvo Beach in 1749. The coins were taken to Santa Cruz Convent on Flores Island and distributed. The exact number of coins found is unknown, but Father Flores studied 9 and later donated them to Johann Franz Podolin, a Swedish numismatist. He wrote an article titled, "Some Notes on the Voyages of the Ancients," based on several Carthaginian and Cyrenaican coins found in 1749 on one of the Azores Islands, in the Göteborgska Vetenskap och Vidderhetssamlingar. The coins are said to be linked to a return route between the Canary Islands, the Açores, and Portugal, known as Volta Pelo Largo. Though further investigation is warranted, it is likely that the Phoenicians, being skilled seafarers, did not attempt to reach or even settle in the Açores. Though it may not be the Phoenicians, it is evident that humans interacted with the archipelago before the arrival of the Portuguese. Other islands in the region, such as Madeira, Canary, and Savage Islands, could also claim the title of Atlantis. While archaeological exploration has not begun on Madeira and Savage Islands, research on the Canary Islands has been conducted. The Canary Islands are known for the extinct native ethnic group, the Guanches. Existing until the 16th or 17th century, when they were assimilated into Spanish culture after subjugation, their tall structure, blonde hair, blue-eyed appearance, and skeletal frame, along with scientific research, support their origins as being Cro-Magnon, which is surrounded by mystery. The Guanches' history is fascinating and has similarities to the subjugation of Native Americans. Additionally, Phoenician artifacts have been discovered in the Canary Islands, including a Phoenician site on Lanzarote, as stated by Pablo Atoche, an archaeology professor at the University of Las Palmas, noting,
Buena Vista is proof of the presence in Lanzarote of a group of humans fully established in the 10th century BC, artifacts of Punic Phoenician origin. Phoenician phase, discovery and initial colonization, circa 10th to 6th centuries BC. This coincides with the process of exploration, appraisal, and exploitation of the Atlantic seaboard of Africa by Phoenician sailors and merchants. This phase would start with a process of passing through Punic phase, colonization, and final establishment circa 6th to 2nd centuries BC. The closure of the Near Eastern markets to metals from the Western Mediterranean after the fall of Tyre, 572 BC, and the consequent redirecting of the economy towards agricultural produce intensified Punic contacts with the indigenous peoples of the West, with an increase in productive business on the Atlantic seaboard and very probably in the Canary Islands by transplanting communities of Libyo-Phoenicians. If we accept the thesis of F. Lopez Pardo, the start of this phase would be very close to the process of creating colonies of Libyo-Phoenicians along the African Atlantic coast described by the Periplus of Hanno. An historic analysis of the archaeological data provided by the Buena Vista site indicate that the colonization of at least one of the Canary Islands, Lanzarote, had already taken place in the 10th century BC. Visits to it could have occurred sometime prior.
In 2019, the Phoenicians before Columbus expedition set sail in a replica of a Phoenician ship from the Mediterranean across the Atlantic in an attempt to establish that the Phoenicians may have sailed to the New World as long ago as the 10th century BCE. There is no convincing archaeological evidence of the Phoenicians reaching the Americas, such as the Paraiba inscription found in Brazil in 1872 was written in Phoenician, describing the voyage of Phoenicians unintentionally crossing the Atlantic. Frank Moorcross explained in Phoenicians in Brazil, published in Biblical Archaeology Review, January-February 1979, that the writing was too preserved and the mixture of Phoenician characters across time periods were inauthentic as well. The Dighton Rock has petroglyphs of unknown origin, with one assumption being Phoenician, which is yet to be proven. First noticed in 1680 by the English colonist Reverend John Danforth, who made a drawing of the petroglyphs. His drawing conflicts with the reports of others and the current markings on the rock. In 1690, Reverend Cotton Mather described the rock in his book, The Wonderful Works of God, commemorated, saying,
"Curiosities of New England, one is that of a mighty rock, very deeply engraved. No man alive knows how or when, filled with strange characters, which would suggest as odd thoughts about them that were here before us, as there are odd shapes in that elaborate monument."
John W. Emmert discovered the Bat Creek inscription on February 14, 1889. According to Cyrus Herzl Gordon, an expert in Near Eastern cultures and ancient languages, the inscription on the tablet was Paleo-Hebrew. Bat Creek inscription and another artifact called the Las Lunas Decalogue stone were revealed to be forgeries. Numerous other indicators, including coins depicting the Americas and pre-Columbian Hebrew in southeastern U.S., have also failed to withstand scientific scrutiny. Regardless of these forgeries, the ship, modeled on a Phoenician shipwreck dating to 600 BC, had completed a successful 20,000-mile voyage around Africa in 2010. After 39 days at sea, the Phoenicia reached the Dominican Republic on December 31st, 2019, showcasing the Phoenicians' boat-building skills and their capability to reach the Americas. There may also be clues amongst the Chachapoyas and their culture in present-day Peru. Many questions have been raised with no clear answers. Phoenician influence has been proven to be more expansive than believed. It is possible that evidence may support wider Phoenician trade or reveal a new underwater city or ancient empire. Alternatively, the truth may be lost to time. Perhaps looking in Egyptian documents can reveal more clues. Or to end it off on this note, it is within the realm of possibility that the magnitude of the civilization may have been overestimated, and yet the profound lessons that can be gleaned from it may be more consequential than its mere existence. Perhaps it is the allegorical construct of this civilization that assumes a life of its own, giving rise to a narrative, an epic, a culture, such that we are propelled to pursue this intangible city, to invest in its abstraction, oblivious to the fact that its historical authenticity is inconsequential. For it is the wisdom that transcends time that holds true significance. Thank you for watching, and please like and subscribe.